10 random facts about me, Frankie Paradiso, also known as the Amsterdam Bard on Java, Francesco d'Amsterdamo, or my real name, Frank Landsman. Number 1. Impending premature death straight after birth. I was born after only 6 months in my mother's womb, and being so premature I weighed only 1 kilo and was turning blue in the face, even though I was obviously unable to talk. The doctor told my distraught parents that it would not be necessary to send birth announcements, as I simply wouldn't make it. Then a guardian angel in the shape of a pediatrician stepped in and suggested administering a few drops of medicinal cognac to stimulate my breathing and instinct to survive this ordeal, of which I must have been vividly aware. This made me cough, breathe, and according to various astonished eyewitnesses, laugh. Back in the day, this was 1962, this was considered quite a miracle, and who am I to disagree? One medical expert did dryly predict that I would be lucky to have a career as a feeble-minded bricklayer due to the lack of oxygen to the brain. So when I graduated with a cum laude master's degree in American literature and comparative literature, after winning a prestigious postgrad scholarship to the venerable University of Exeter, England, I sent him a copy of the unequivocal certificate, simply to make him and countless overconfident colleagues eat a slice of humble pie. I have studied 16 languages under circumstances not invariably controlled and planned, but must admit to a remarkable weakness in the field of mathematics, once scoring a junior high school mark of 1 out of 10, which means I had succeeded in spelling my name correctly on the test. So I have delegated this particular area of expertise to my chess-playing kid brother, who's done very well for himself, hitting a home run, leading him as far afield as Cambridge University, Amsterdam, and back to its place of birth, the ancient Roman town of Noviomagus, locally pronounced Nijmegen, making it sound like a commercial for Fisherman's Friend in the Netherlands. I personally think that if one shows no aptitude whatsoever for a certain school subject, one should not be forced to undergo the utter torture of having to study it 4 times a week for 4 flipping years. Just as you don't force a tone-deaf child to practice the violin incessantly until his heart and subsequently the strings break. As my fave American rock band Sparks used to sing, it's a lot like playing the violin. You cannot start off and be Yehudi Menuhin. Number 2. The potential spy who did not love Vladimir Putin. When I was a teenager in the 1970s, there was still military conscription in Holland, so when my number came up, I was allowed to finish my academic studies first. Then I opted for spy training, which involved learning Russian in 6 months to eavesdrop on the likes of Vladimir Putin, who was to become the head of the Secret Service, the KGB. At the time, he was an undercover agent in East Germany, posing as a translator. However, when I underwent a medical examination, I was told they'd already trained plenty of recruits born in 1962, and furthermore that my short-sightedness of -5 would render me medically unfit anyway. For this decisive eye test, the medical officer put my contact lenses in a kind of glue that blurred my vision to such a degree that I would have shot my own sergeant major. So I lost no time in applying for a job as a teacher-trainer English instructor, for which I had to fly to London, where voluntary service overseas was based. I still love Russian literature, though, and old Vlad has done rather well for himself after not being bugged by me. Number 3. I've been living and teaching on the island of Java for almost a quarter of a century, but I could well have ended up elsewhere. The astute VSO London recruitment officer who interviewed me categorized me as a candidate who would fit in well in Asia rather than Africa. But my first job offer involved a UNESCO language center on the slowly sinking island of the Maldives, where foreign staff had been taken hostage during a coup d'etat, while the second offer came from the secondary school in Zimbabwe, where the previous ELT volunteer had left after a week without any apparent reason. The third job offer was one I was only too glad to accept, because it came from a teacher training college in a small traditional town named Tuban, whose teaching staff had been waiting for 7 long years. Number 4. Coming from a family of car lovers, I suffer from quite severe motor phobia. As a consequence, I try to avoid traveling by motorized vehicles, spending more time walking, swimming and cycling than anybody else among my acquaintances. My father once bravely attempted to teach me how to drive, but when the 2 front wheels were spinning hair-raisingly above a Spanish ravine, he calmly stepped on the brake and told me that this would suffice, my son. This led to the idea of joining a triathlon when I turned 50, which would have involved running from London to Dover, swimming across the Channel, and finally cycling from Calais to Paris. However, somebody told me the Channel was unbearably cold, heavily polluted, and full of fairly peckish sharks, so I gave up the idea altogether. I do frequently dream of that particular challenge, though. Number 5. I'm the only man in the world to have turned down Joe Rowling for a coffee and a chat. I was reading Poe's famous horror story, The Fall of the House of Usher, at Exeter University's library for an upcoming paper or presentation, and suddenly a tallish blonde lady walked past my desk, who kindly invited me for coffee and a chat, and maybe more, though the latter may have been one of those pleasant oral hallucinations one gets to hear twice in a lifetime. I coolly, and as fate would have it most unwisely, turned her down. A decade later, the posters went up in my hometown of Amsterdam, announcing the latest sensation from England, the Harry Potter saga, written by a lady considered to be wealthier than Queen Elizabeth II. Yes, the very same lady. To top it all, my godfather was a children's book publisher at the time, looking for budding and desperate young writers. Number 6. My notorious ancestor. Though I'm generally considered as a benign, harmless type who passes customs at international airports without having to open a suitcase or to make up stories about why it should have been filled with an Indonesian toffee-like delicacy called dodol, one of my direct ancestors on my father's maternal side was the notorious corsair Sulaiman Reis, who became admiral of the Sultan of Algeria's fleet, terrorizing the Mediterranean until he was killed by a cannonball on the 10th of October 1620. Rumor has it that he married one of the Sultan's daughters, who was a Morisco, that is to say, a person of mixed African and Spanish or Portuguese blood, who has endowed me with wavy hair and great fondness of fado and guitar music. Since most Dutchmen from the north have sleek hair, this resulted in me being jocularly but respectfully referred to as Apollo by the history and classics teachers, because I wore it long down to my shoulders. No serious bullying ensued, as I happened to be 6'4" and fairly broad-shouldered, and a sharper tongue in terms of repartee than a confiscated Swiss army knife, if I may add. Number 7. Coincidentally shared date of birth with rock stars. I was born on the same date, the 8th of January, as the king of rock, Elvis Presley, and the musical chameleon David Bowie. My stage, or rather YouTube name, is Frankie Paradiso, not derived from the legendary gangster Mickey Paradiso, but from the Amsterdam hippie temple and concert venue that used to be a church, where I saw the great but woefully underrated American singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentalist Andy Pratt perform. Another singer-songwriter named Wally Tax, the Dutch frontman of The Outsiders, a proto-grunge band that once upstaged the Rolling Stones, no less, told me in person that he had jammed with Elvis in the mid-1980s and that the Memphis Miracle had faked his death in 1977 to make his great escape from the pressures of mega fame and to clean up his act. One of his former paramours, named Tura, confirmed to me that the so-called corpse in the casket was a waxwork and that one of the Presleyan sideburns came off as the face was melting. Number 8. Volleyball dreams gone up in smoke. Even though I love all racket sports such as squash, badminton and tennis, my main sport was volleyball. I was selected to play in the Dutch national junior squad and played one international match against Germany, which we lost, much to the chagrin of my father. His brother had been taken prisoners by the Germans during the occupation and had to perform forced labor in a factory which he sabotaged with a fellow prisoner from the Ukraine, a real hero in our family. Number 9. I almost killed a famous British academic. In the middle of a literary discussion about Madame Bovary at Exeter University in Devon, England, I cracked what I thought was a simple turnaround joke when an American postgrad student claimed that Emma was a kind of proto-feminist with heroic qualities. I quipped, Emma's far from heroic in my opinion. I mean, she reads nothing but escapist fiction. Now, had she perused more serious novels, such as Flaubert's masterpiece, she might have avoided some of her grave errors of judgment. Professor Michael Wood, who was also a film critic, somehow found this so droll that he laughed and laughed till his face turned almost blue. Fortunately, he recovered. Otherwise, I might have been the first Dutch visiting scholar to make the headline, Dutchman Questioned about telling killing joke. Number 10. YouTube debut based on Bet. From my early teens onwards, I dabbled in making music on many different musical instruments, mainly picked up at the local Amsterdam flea market called Waterloo Square. At one time or another, I've taught myself to play the Celtic harp, drums including upside-down trash cans, the Spanish bandurria, the Chinese banjo, the Turkish saz, a harp guitar called Schrammelgitarre from East Germany, the charango from the Andes, an analog synthesizer that could simulate thunder and birdsong, and the Italian mandolin, in addition to taking guitar and piano lessons and even a course in harmony. An American said I would never garner more than a handful of views on YouTube. So I proved him wrong by uploading 440 music, literary and comedy videos that have attracted almost 130,000 views so far. So I'm glad to say he lost the bet. One of my literature professors once asked me how I would categorize my life if I were to use a literary genre. I would say revenge comedy. That's it from me, Frankie Paradiso. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Cheerio!